welcome to our last episode of season 2 of the Pastor's Wives podcast. We are back in studio to close out this season, and we have a dear friend of mine and a very exciting guest, Sarah Enterline. She is an apologist and has so much wisdom and knowledge to share with us today. We're going to dive into so many different topics today, so I'm excited for you to hear this conversation. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
We're so happy for you to be here. We want to get to know you a little bit. So introduce yourself to us, who you are, where you live, kind of your family and all of that. We want to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Enterline, and I'm married to Matt Enterline. And Matt and his father, Larry, run Calvary Curriculum, and they've been doing that for years and years and years. And my father-in-law, Larry, was the children's pastor under Chuck Smith. So we've been in Calvary Chapel a very long time, grown up in Calvary, and we currently live in Temecula, and Matt and I attend a Calvary Chapel Temecula. And Matt helped with the children's ministry, and he also is an assisting pastor here. And then I also teach in the women's ministry. And we have 2 boys, crazy. We have one turning 18 this year and also one turning 1. So that's been fun. But it's fun. And we've just been kind of here and just helping out and assisting at Calvary Chapel Temecula for about 4 years now, I think. So it's a little over 4 years that we've been here. And then before that, obviously, Matt was your husband's assisting pastor. So
Yeah, so our husbands grew up together. So they're dear friends of old, I think from literally birth or shortly thereafter. In the Calvary Chapel world can be small sometimes. And you actually went to Bible college with my brother, right? Did you?
Yes. As your brother and I were in a band together.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, Calvary Chapel Bible College, if you went there over many years, you'll find you cross paths with many people in Calvary, which is really awesome because it means that there are people still walking with the Lord and serving him, and it raised up many faithful leaders in ministry today and bore a lot of fruit. And so when did you go to the Bible college, Sarah?
I was there from 2002 to 2004.
Okay, yeah, right after I left. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your academic background, because you've got several degrees in apologetics and various things. You're a teacher and all that. So tell us a little bit professionally about how you got into apologetics and kind of bit of your background.
Yeah, so I got into apologetics because I grew up in Calvary Chapel in Temecula, but I went to public school, and I had an atheist teacher when I was in high school that taught science, and he was very active in trying to convince me to not be a Christian anymore and to believe in just evolution and the atheism that comes along with that. And, I was that eager Christian kid, always trying to argue in class, thinking I knew everything at 15. And but he kind of sent me on a journey of really, because I would try to challenge him, but then he would come back with something and I didn't know how to answer what he was saying. And so he sent me kind of on a journey of faith discovery and trying to figure out, like, do I actually believe this? Is this just something I've grown up with? And really figure out for myself, what do I actually believe and why do I believe it? And so that kind of led me down to Bible college. And so I ended up in Bible college after I graduated high school. And at Bible college, I really found my calling. I felt very, very attracted to apologetics, and I felt like it was something that God really wanted me to do. And so it just ended up being something that became a career. I kind of fell into it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I got
as do many things, I feel like in life. The Lord, you're just like, how am I here? And that's what the Lord had for you.
Yeah, so I got a degree in biblical studies and was going to just be like a Bible teacher. And then I kept getting asked to teach various things, and eventually apologetics became one of those things. And so I got a degree in philosophy and a degree in history, and went to Veritas for apologetics. And so I feel like a lot of my academic schooling has really contributed to being able to see, just the Christian faith from various perspectives, from a historical perspective, from a philosophical perspective. And I feel like that's helped me really have a concrete trust in my faith. And so anyways, after Bible college, I became a teacher. And then after that, I got invited to work on a historical apologetics project, which basically is studying all the apologetic arguments throughout history. And specifically, my focus was the modern era, or the time of the Enlightenment in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found some really interesting information through that project, specifically that there were women doing apologetics at that time. And so I ended up writing a book about one of them, and that kind of got me started on my book writing publishing journey. And so I wrote a book about that, and then another woman I wrote a book about, and now I have 4 books. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about those books, but what I hope we will accomplish today in this short podcast is the world of academia has kind of been largely for a long time where apologetics has lived, and because it's a lot of intellectual arguments, but yet in our today's culture, I think it has been made available to people more through YouTube, social media. You don't necessarily have to have been to a college to hear these professors talk, or to hear these, arguments, or what it is. And I think it's been an amazing tool. I know as teenagers, my son is very much into apologetics, and it has been a huge tool in his life. Because we're in a culture of feelings, and people are blowing up their entire worldview from what they've been raised, because they don't feel good about it, or they their feelings are leading them in a different direction. And so having something solid and evidence based, and proofs for scripture, and all these different things that we're going to talk about today, it's just been an incredible tool in my family, just being a parent, being in church. And so I love that we get to pick your brain, who studied all the things, but then we get to how can we do that for the average person in ministry? And so that's what I hope we're going to talk about today. But I want to start by talking about this first book that you wrote, and this woman, Susanna Newcomb. I said it wrong. Yeah, I did say it right. Okay. Tell us a little bit about her, why she's so interesting and fascinating, why you chose to write your first book on her. We want to learn a little bit about her.
So when I was reading a lot of these historical works, I came across this one that was really intriguing to me, and it was actually written anonymously. So they didn't know who the author was, and it just said in someone's handwriting by a lady. And so it was anonymous, and it was like as if someone who had owned the book had written, that it was written by a woman. And so that led me down this rabbit hole of research where I was like, okay, this is written by a woman. This is incredible. And the reason it's incredible is because during this time period, the 1600s to the 1900s, women were not seen as academics. Women were not invited to the table of ideas. Women were not invited to publish anything like that. And so the idea that this woman could have published something that was so groundbreaking in the field of theology, which is a male-dominated field, was just incredible to me. And so her name is Susanna Newcomb, as we said, and this is the book. It's called No Apologies. And it's basically her life. So I did a deep dive on research on her life. And so her life story is in there. I even went to Oxford a couple times and Cambridge, and I stayed with Ruth's family when I went. And it's just incredible, just her life. So basically she was born to a pastor that was a father. Her father was a pastor, and it was just a little country church. We actually went to this church, and it was out in the middle of nowhere in the English countryside. And she grew up and ended up marrying a divinity professor at Cambridge, at St. John's School in Cambridge. And that, I think, opened the door and allowed her to really exercise her calling as maybe an academic. She probably wasn't schooled at like an official college. We don't really know much about her schooling. I'm assuming she was maybe tutored at home by her mom. They had lots of kids, at least I think 8 to 9 children. So I'm assuming she learned a lot from her father, because she actually married She was probably around 40 when she married. And so she was already kind of learned at that point. And how that happened, we don't have any information. So there's no records about that. But when she got married to this man, he was actually at Cambridge at the same time Isaac Newton was a math professor there. So we're
Oh,
talking like the
wow.
age of the greats. And so she had
Yeah.
access to all of this information and this academia and this knowledge that the average woman may not have had access to. And so this
Right.
was in the 1720s, and she wrote a book called An Enquiry into the Truth of the Christian Religion. And she
Wow.
basically made the case for the fact that there is a God. This is the type of God that exists. The Bible is true, that Jesus is that God, that miracles can happen, that there's an afterlife. I mean, she really, really gave just an incredible, robust case for Christianity. And she published in 1728, which is unheard of for a woman at the time. Some women published philosophically on different issues, but really specifically a Christian defense of the faith had never been written by a woman yet. So she was the absolute first. So I call her the first officially published female apologist in history. And then
Right.
it took about 100 years for the next one to come along. So funny enough, after about 100 years,
Wow.
then we have about 13 or 14 more women that came along in the 1800s that wrote on Christian apologetics. So that's kind of my focus as an
Ah.
academic. I focus on these women that wrote defenses of Christianity from various perspectives throughout the 1800s. And so I also have book number 2, which is called Digging Deeper. And this is about Mary Broderick. And she is actually an archaeologist from the time of the early 1900s. And so she was in Egypt basically around the same time as they were finding like King Tut's tomb. And so she was like
Oh,
right in
wow.
the thick of it all. And she wrote a book talking about the trial and crucifixion of Jesus. And she gives a case for the empty tomb. And it's pretty
Oh,
incredible. And so
wow.
that's my second book. And then I'm also working on another one that's going to cover the rest of the women. So that's eventually
Uh,
coming, someday.
That's amazing. Wow. And it's kind of fascinating going as early as, the 1700s.
Mhm.
I think I heard you say once about how when you were reading in the research, you were like, oh, some of these like great arguments that we attribute to amazing greats that came later, this was
Uh-huh.
actually like already here in Susanna's work.
Yes, yes. A lot of the cosmological arguments, reasoning from cause and effect, and a chain of causes leading back to the beginning of like the Big Bang. A lot of those have been formulated, most recently by like people like William Lane Craig and people like that. But she put out this robust argument for it, hundreds of years ago. And even Elizabeth Jane Whately, who's another one, she actually gave a very robust version of C.S. Lewis's Lord Liar Lunatic argument, his trilemma, which, everyone attributes that to C.S. Lewis, but it actually was from a Jewish rabbi in the 1800s, right
Wow.
around the same time as Elizabeth Whately. So it's possible that she came up with it completely on her own, separate from the Scottish rabbi too, John Duncan. So it's interesting to
Wow.
see how some of these arguments are in these books. And that's why I tell people, gosh, historical apologetics is so valuable, because a lot of people don't read past about 30-ish years of apologetics, and they're just missing out on just this
Right.
incredible richness that there is. And a lot of these works can be found. I work with the historicalapologetics.org. And so you can find all of those works at that website.
Okay, that's a great website actually and a great resource because in the same way that we read, the old great books of old and the richness that's there that's seriously lacking in a lot of today's writings, it's the same with apologetics and you think, oh, this isn't, something that somebody just thought up right now. Like this was heavily, thought about and written about many, many, many years ago. Was there a favorite thing that you found in your research, something that you were like, oh wow, this she made this argument, or was it?
You know what? There's so many. Like it's hard to kind of pick
Yeah,
one. I feel like Susanna really. That's the reason why I wrote about her first. She just stood out to me the most because she was the
right.
earliest.
Yeah,
But just
yeah.
just the arguments that she made. I mean, she's answering people like David Hume, who's a huge skeptic. He's against miracles, and she answered him like before he even came along. And so it's just
Right.
like, man,
Yeah.
if these people had just, the hard thing is, like I said, she published anonymously, but when
Right.
in her bio, you find out it was like actually kind of an open secret amongst her friends that she was the author
Oh,
of this
wow.
book. And so it's just like, but it's just sad to me that these women have gotten lost to history. And if they hadn't been, how much further along would we be in a lot of our apologetic arguments, or
Mm.
how much better would we be at apologetics if we had, taken because I think a lot of the issue in the church today with women's ministry is that women felt like that wasn't for them. And so women who maybe had an intellectual bent, or maybe the life of the mind was very interesting to them, I think they felt like they couldn't exercise it in the church. And I think that might have been different had we really
Hmm.
celebrated these women as opposed to hide them in history. I think the church would
Yeah.
probably look a little bit different today. And I think that would be a good thing. But so hopefully that's kind of my goal, is revealing these women, is showing that, we have this rich history, this heritage of truth that's gone back
Hmm.
hundreds of years, and women engaging in apologetics and learning how to defend their faith and doing it for their children. This isn't a new thing. This is something that's been
Right.
happening. It's just it
Yeah.
was lost for a little while, and then now it's,
Hmm. That's
yeah.
amazing. So I would check out both those books. One thing I will say about the No Apologies book, what I love about it is, don't you add in there her literal writings that you can go and
Oh,
read literally what she put, which can be kind
yeah.
of hard to decipher because was it Old English and
Yes, it was like Shakespearean English, so it was hard. It was
right,
hard to read. So there's a version in there that's her original Shakespearean, English, with the these and the thous and all that kind of stuff, that
right.
King James English. And then I obviously translated it into modern English so that the average person could understand what she was actually saying.
Right. And I think that's so fascinating. So to learn about her, but then to actually read her writings, that's amazing. So okay, so I want to move on a little bit because you put out a current book, which to me is one of the most incredible resources. I've been telling everyone about it. I want to I have it right here. This book, did this just came out what if 6 months ago maybe?
October, yeah, October.
October. So a visual guide to biblical apologetics. And not only is this good for, adults, people in ministry and everything, this is amazing for your teens, your young adults, your college students, because we're such a visual world and culture. Like if something doesn't have a picture, people don't even pay attention. It's like they tell you on posting social media, like, oh, put the text over an image and it'll draw the person in. And so, a lot of apologetics books, they can seem quite, daunting at first. Maybe they're thick textbooks and you're like, where do I even begin? This just tackles almost every topic of apologetics, and it breaks it down and puts it visually into, graphics and everything. So tell us a little bit about this book, how it got started, and then I want to dive into what's in it.
Yeah, so our pastor, Joe Holden, has actually been my mentor since Bible college. He was the one who, in Bible college, told me, you should be an apologist, and kind of became my mentor at that point. So it's been over 20 years now that he's been my mentor. And he wrote a infographic guide to the Bible for Harvest House. And it's very similar to this book, but it's just specifically about the 66 books of the Bible. And then they basically asked him, hey, you're an apologist. Would you want to do one on apologetics? And so, of course, he said yes, but he also had become a full-time pastor at that point, and he also runs a university. And so he was like, I need help. And so he
Yeah.
brought me on to help him with this project. So we kind of just divvied up the topics and wrote each page, based on what we had picked. And a lot of my pages, or what had come out of this book was, or what had been put into this book was my curriculum. So I taught middle school and high school Bible for many years. I taught history at middle school. And so I had to learn how to break down these difficult theological topics into very, very tiny bite-sized chunks. And also, how do you
Mm-hmm.
lay it out in a way that's visually appealing in a curriculum and that kind of thing. So a lot of the stuff that I put in the book has been tested, in the sense of it's been in a real classroom and it's
Right.
tracked with real kids. And I've gotten feedback and I've learned, okay, that didn't work, or this word was too complicated or something like that. So I feel like that's the reason, while it's great for adults who are just kind of dipping their toe into the water of apologetics, it's also great for kids because it's been tested in a real classroom. But yeah, but like we were saying, online today, people have a very short attention span, 30 seconds and they're gone, maybe even shorter now. And so it is important that you have visuals. I myself am a visual learner. So if something's not in front of my face, I tend to forget it. But also, I think a big thing is the way it's laid out. It's just these little bite-sized chunks of information. And so it's not, this long treatise or this long book on one specific topic that's going to overwhelm you. It's a little bit of everything. And that's on purpose. We wanted to do that on purpose because we wanted to kind of have a book where if you have a friend that's got a question and you just want to give them a real quick answer, you have somewhere you can just quickly go and look up an answer to that specific. So honestly, like, I think it's even great. Like, if you do street evangelism, you should probably carry it around with you.
Yeah, I was going to say we had several people get this at our church when you came and shared at our church. And was the most common comment was that my coworker asks me these questions, like, and I really don't know the answer to them, or I have no idea why, creation is true, or the Bible's reliable, or anything. And they were like, this is just incredible. Like, the contents, you just look at your topic, you pick it up, and it's just clear and concise and easy to read. But so much information, and it looks like, even a high schooler could follow it. And yet the depth of information there is massive. And so this is just an amazing resource for anyone in ministry. But I want to kind of give an example because one of the things we had you come and do with our women at our church, which we had such amazing feedback, was the topic you taught on the reliability of the Bible. Because, much of the kind of parental age where their kids are teenagers, they're young adults, and perhaps they've walked away from the Lord because of societal issues like we talked about, emotional reasons, maybe hypocritical people they have known, or experiences they might have had in the church or whatever. And yet when it boils down to, are we going to reject God entirely? When we talk about people's, actions and things that they've done or experiences that they've had, none of those things actually change the fundamental truths of, the Christian faith, because they're rooted in the Bible and scripture. And so you don't really have an argument to start unless you've established that the Bible is reliable. And so I want you to talk about a little bit about that. Maybe give a synopsis of your reliability of the Bible kind of workshop that you do, because it's so amazing. I learned so much in that one. And then how we have this in the book to look to as well.
Yeah. So I actually usually, when people ask me, can you come and give an apologetic talk? And they've never really had anything like that, like a lot of women's groups or whatever. I often offer reliability of the Bible simply because when you look at all of the other arguments in apologetics, usually you're dealing with very high level science, or science or philosophy that's very high level, that the average person would have a hard time tracking with when you're talking about, like, for example, cosmological argument, right?
Yeah,
That's
if you're not a physics master, you're like, I have no idea.
Yes, so that's a little bit overwhelming. So usually I start with something like the reliability of the Bible. The reason I do that is because when you look at the evidence that you would need to prove an argument like this, it's tangible evidence. So it's stuff that you can touch, taste, feel, see with your own eyes, right? So for example, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, like you can go see the Dead Sea Scrolls with your own eyeballs, right? So that's one of the reasons I think this particular argument is a good one to start with, because it's something that you can track with people. People know what archaeology is. People know what, manuscripts are, stuff like that. And so I feel like it's a good place to start. And what we do in the book is we break it down into an acronym called MAPS. So M is manuscripts, A is archaeology, P is prophecy, and S is science. And so what it is the M gives you basically all of the manuscript evidence for the Bible. And then A gives you all of the archaeological theological evidence for the Bible. And then P talks about how many prophecies have come true. And then S is all about, the Bible. I always tell people the Bible's not a science textbook, but where it does talk about scientific issues, it's always accurate. And usually it's accurate thousands of years or hundreds of years before those discoveries have been made in modern science. So, like, for example, a lot of the constellations and a lot of the movement of the planets and the fact that the Earth is a sphere and all of those things were in the Bible, the water cycle, like that light moves and air has weight. These are a lot of these things were not discovered until more recently in history, yet the Bible talks about them way back. And so the fact that it's accurate shows, well, that it had to have come from some type of supernatural source, because the average human would not have known that and did not have the technology to find that out. So, so the manuscript evidence, we use the Dead Sea Scrolls for the Old Testament. We talk about the fact that even though the Bible is 2,000 years, let's say, now removed from the time of Jesus, it has not changed in its main content. And when I say main content, I mean like the message has not changed in 2,000 years. When you compare it to the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's above 95% accuracy. And so just things like that. I mean, that's important when you're talking about the Jewish communities that existed, before Jesus or during Jesus's time. They were active in making sure that we had good copies that would last a long time. And now we have those. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls. So if you take your Bible and you compare it to a Dead Sea Scroll, it's almost identical. So we haven't lost the message in thousands of years. And that's important because, the time of the Enlightenment, they were questioning. There was a lot of biblical criticism, and they were questioning, but what they didn't realize, we hadn't found the Dead Sea Scrolls yet. So, there was a lot of open season on the Bible. And then now in the 50s, the 1950s, we found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And because of that, it really solidified our case for scripture. And so now we have this embarrassment of riches. We have over 24,000 New Testament manuscripts that we can rely on, and just an embarrassment of riches as you compare it to other ancient documents. When you compare it to like Homer's Iliad or Homer's Odyssey or these
which
epics,
people don't usually question.
no questions, whether Homer lived or whether Julius Caesar lived or any of this stuff. Yet we have more evidence for the Bible and the biblical stories than we do for any of the biblical events. That we have more than any of those by thousands of manuscripts. And so it's a good way. Like for me, I tend to forget things. And so for me, maps is great, because then when I'm talking to somebody, I can think like, oh, why do you believe in the Bible is reliable? I can say, oh, maps, manuscripts. Oh, wait, there's 24. And then I remember everything as I remember that happened.
Yeah.
So that's in there. Well,
I love that. Yeah. So that's in here. And there's been a lot of talk about that lately with that big podcast with Wesley Huff and Billy Carlson, and then going on. That's worth a watch if you haven't watched that, where he kind of destroys that poor guy's life's work.
Well, Wes did a great job. He was on Joe Rogan, which is the biggest podcast in the world. And I feel like I'm so happy that it was him, and he's so well spoken, and he just was an excellent example of what a Christian apologist should be. And so I'm so happy that happened.
Yeah. And so when you talk about, manuscripts and archaeology, like what I loved about, I forget his ministry because I followed him for a while, but they have a website and they put all this evidence that you can click on, the Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts, and see. Yes. It's like once you start, it's so fascinating. But just all those things are just tools in your toolkit when you're talking with non-Christians, or when your kids suddenly come to you and have all these objections, and you're equipped. You have things, to address those issues. And so I loved this when you first talked about this maps, and I think it's a really good tool to give the women in our church. Some of these things that perhaps they don't know about. And so I want you to talk a little bit about incorporating apologetics into women's ministry and how you see that happening.
Yeah. So I teach the women's ministry at our church, and we do, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, Calvary Chapel. And a lot of Calvary Chapel pastors' wives or women's ministry leaders, they don't know how they can incorporate something like apologetics, because it is such a topical issue. How do I bring that in when we're so book by book and chapter by chapter and verse by verse. But there's a few different ways you can actually do this. And I've done all of the different ways. So one of the ways that you can incorporate is simply as the topic comes up. So for example, like the book of Job, like I taught the book of Job last year, and there's so much science in
Which
the
is
book of
amazing, by
Job.
the way, because not many women
Yes,
tackle that book.
right. And so when the science came up, I stopped and I talked about how that can be, give you confidence in your faith, and how the Bible is accurate when it comes to talking about science. And, or like Romans, I taught Romans, and Romans chapter 1 talks about how the evidence of God is in creation, and no one's without an excuse. And how does that work? Well, you have the intelligent design, and you have just different arguments for why we can know that there is a God and that he exists and that we can see evidence of him. And so there's definitely ways of doing it, even within that structure of chapter by chapter, verse by verse. Is just stopping when the topic comes up and just, giving a little bit of a sidebar about how this can be used to help you with your apologetic arguments or even strengthen your own faith. There's also different ways, like we do like supplemental events, like we'll do like one-day events. I did one last summer where we did a Bible interpretation workshop. So we spent the whole day talking about how do you interpret the Bible, what are some practical tools you can use, how do you talking about critically reading, circling in the text, underlining in the text, looking up Greek words, kind of talking about all that kind of stuff. How do you do that? How do you do it well and correctly so that you're not misinterpreting scripture? We've also done evangelism seminars where we've done like a one-day event where women come and they learn not only how to approach people, or what's the appropriate way, what's different ways you could do it, but also then what do you say once you've approached them, and what are some common objections you're going to get? And then we do some role playing. And so there's definitely different ways you could do it as a retreat theme. I just did a retreat for Calvary Chapel Grand Junction where it was always be ready was the theme, 1 Peter 3:15. And I did a whole weekend on how do you use apologetics in your practical life as a Christian? How should it affect you? And some women do like moms groups where they go through like Mama Bear Apologetics that was written by my friend Hillary. And that's an excellent book for moms who are worried about losing their kids to the world. You could have your mom's group at church go through that book. You could do a book club that's separate from women's ministry. Maybe the women stay after women's for one time a week or whatever, and they go through a book. So you could pick an apologetic book to do. You could do a thing where you stop in between maybe books of the Bible and you do like a topical series. So like Mary Jo Sharp has a study called Why Do You Believe That? And it goes through all the basic apologetic arguments. And you could do that in between, like, let's say you do Acts, and then you could do that, and then you could do Romans, or, something like that. So there's lots of different ways that you could incorporate apologetics into your women's ministry. Also, you could even have, while the moms are doing a group, maybe you could even have like a Sunday school type thing where the kids of those moms are doing a kids apologetic study or something like that. So there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate apologetics into your women's ministry that still work within that framework of chapter by chapter, verse by verse. That's not going to interrupt that system of how we do things, I guess.
Or all of the ways. Like I loved, like we've done like summer studies on Mama Bear Apologetics, and we've done special events and conferences. And then as we're going through the Bible, don't be afraid to like bring up those opportunities in creation to talk about those things, because I don't think we can afford not to in today's culture with, being parents and being talking to women in the church and offering wisdom and counsel where's needed. Like we need to know these things and have these in our toolkit, so to speak, to be able to pull out when we need them. And I think even I found myself being able to bring it in like with my little ones, because I didn't really dive into apologetics personally until my like almost 17-year-old was maybe like 10, 11. And I've noticed just with my younger two now who are what are they, 5 and 7. I can't remember, too many kids. How you can, when you're reading with the kids at night, you can pull in little things, and it's important for kids to know that we aren't raising them as Christians in some kind of mind manipulative cult. Like we're raising them to know the truth. Like we're Christians because it's true, and there are reasons, all these reasons why in here is this Bible is full. This book is full of reasons why it's the truth and why you can stand on it. And so I feel like that is a starting point for you as a parent, as a women's leader, as minister of the Lord. And so I think all these tools are just amazing for us, for the church today. So we thank you so much for writing and taking the time to do all these resources. What I want to ask you as we're wrapping up, who are some of your favorite people that you have learned from? What are some books that you would recommend? Tell us a little bit about who you like to listen to.
Well, I'm a big reader. So the number one book that I recommend to people, that if you're going to read one book, make it Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. That's, I feel like that's like the one.
Yes.
If you're going to read just one book, please pick that one.
Yeah.
He's just so good at bringing out really deep things and making them very simple. And I feel like it's a very foundational book for apologetics. And even as a Christian, these are things you should just know as a Christian. And really quick, I just want to mention, when you are incorporating apologetics into your women's ministry, even if you don't specifically cover apologetic topics, I want to just encourage you to take the time to clarify doctrine. And talk about different theological views when you're teaching women's ministry. A lot of time we just tell women what they should believe, but not why, but also like, where did that belief come from? And why do we believe it? And what are the ins and outs of it? And why does this church over here believe this one thing and we believe, so for example, like when we went through Romans, I did a thing on the difference between essentials and non-essentials. What's an essential doctrine and what's a non-essential doctrine? Because what was happening is a lot of the women were saying things like baptism or communion, or these are these essential doctrines that you have to do to be saved, and that's not true, right? So why does one church fully dunk their people, and why does one church just sprinkle, right? Why does one church do it when you're a baby, and why does one church do it when you're an adult, or when you're, so I think it's really important that even if you're not going to cover apologetics, please at least cover like doctrine and theology when it comes up, because it's going to come up, especially if you teach something like Romans. It's all doctrine, right? So clarifying doctrine and theological views, giving different views on like the end times, and maybe not, you could say this is what our church holds to, right? Which is what I did. This is our church's view. However, I just want you to know that there are these other views out there, so that you're not shocked when you come across them, or that when your child comes home and says, well, my friend believes this, you're not like, I don't have any idea why they would believe that, or, that's just wrong, when really they are brothers and sisters in Christ. It's just a different way of interpreting scripture. And I don't mean essential truths like Jesus is God and things like that. I mean, how do we baptize? And should we take communion once or every time or whatever? So just things like that, I just want to encourage the pastors' wives to consider when they are teaching. So Mere Christianity, back to that topic, Mere Christianity is one of my favorites. I also wrote down The Privilege by Kay Smith. For women who are in ministry. That one is a great just kind of book for pastors' wives. Also, like I mentioned, Mary Jo Sharp has a study called Why Do You Believe That? That's a great one to do. I also love On Being a Servant of God by Warren Wiersbe. That's one of my favorite books. If you're in ministry, I think it should be required reading if you're in ministry.
For sure.
But also for women who are teaching the Bible, Wiersbe's Bible commentary is one of my favorites. He just has a really good, he does a really good job of breaking scripture down into talking points, and gives really good acronyms or alliterations. He's very good at that. I don't know how he came up with all of it, but it's just a great tool for women. I also love J. Vernon McGee's Bible commentaries when I'm studying. I love all of the Bible software online that you can find the Greek words or the Hebrew words.
What's your favorite software? Do you do Blue Letter Bible, Logos, or?
I honestly use it all, because what I've noticed is that depending on, so just sidebar, a lot of the Bible translations come from different manuscripts. And so some of them translate the words differently. And so I actually like using all of them because then I get a general idea of kind of what the majority of people translated that word as opposed to just one. So I
Right.
use like Bible Gateway, like Mounce's Reverse Interlinear. I use Logos. I use Blue Letter Bible. Like I use them all. I use Strong's and Vines because I want to know what are the majority of people, how do they translate this word? And a lot of times in the English, the true meaning gets lost a lot. And so if you are a Bible teacher and you are not referring to the original languages, I strongly encourage you to do so because a lot of the true meaning and that deeper meaning of it's lost in the English language. You know, we only have one word for love in English and there are 5 in the Greek language. And so you can be more specific as well. And so I definitely would say invest in some sort of interlinear Bible or some sort of software that allows you to kind of learn those things as you study, because I feel like the women at my church, at least, they just devour that stuff. They find it fascinating.
Yeah.
And
And it's
so,
surprising how many women's studies I've seen written and you're like, "Oh, they're defining a word." And with the old languages, unless you're like the scholar, you're like, words can be different depending on like its context and where it's ring and oh, that's like, the wrong word for this verse and it can be like a minefield. So it's really important to kind of study that. Yeah, and I love using all that software. It's such an amazing tool. I remember my dad was a pastor, and back in the day, he'd have to have 5,000 books, and we can just have it opened on like different tabs on the screen. It's like a
oh
huge
yeah,
blessing. So,
yes.
lastly, who are some of your favorite apologists that you look to today?
Oh
Do you have
my.
any favorite female ones? I mean, lately I'm a bit of a Nancy Pearcey fan.
Okay, Nancy. Okay, we call Nancy like she's like the godmother
Okay.
because she's kind of really since Dorothy Sayers, she's kind of really been the pioneer for women in the field. I feel like her book Saving Leonardo is incredible.
Oh, I haven't read that one.
Okay, so it's amazing. It's all about culture and art, and it's incredible. So, Nancy,
Oh, I think I do.
100% love her. I also love Natasha Crane. I
Yes.
love Elisa Childers, obviously. I know you guys had her at the conference. I
Hmm.
had just had a baby, so I was not there,
Yeah,
but
you did. You had a free pass this year.
so Elisa Childers, Natasha Crane, Hillary Ferrer with Mama Bear Apologetics.
Yeah.
Lindsay Mendenwalt just wrote a great book called Bridge Building Apologetics, talking about how you bridge that gap with people with Christianity. And so there's just a lot of women out there doing this now, and
Yeah.
it's incredible. Like I'm so happy because 20 years ago that was not the case.
Right,
Um,
right.
so yeah, so
Yeah.
those women for sure. Mary Jo Sharp is great. Um, Melissa Kane Travis, she's got a PhD in science, and
Oh, I
she
don't know her.
is just brilliant. She's in
Wow.
Texas, so there's lots of stuff out there. I would say definitely check out womenapologetics.com. You'll find a
Okay.
lot of women on there. And then yeah, if you just Google women in apologetics, you're going to come up with.
So let us know, how can we stay in touch with you, your resources, speak and engage requests? Where is all that held? Do you have a website? Do you have Amazon? Tell us all the things.
Yeah, so all my books can be found on Amazon. So that's easy, right? You just type in my name, except that I always use my middle initial because there is another Sarah Enterline. So I
Oh,
use,
is
yeah.
that interesting?
So she was born Sarah Enterline, whereas I married into that name. So that's okay. She can keep it.
Yeah.
So I go by Sarah R. Enterline. So
Okay.
Sarah R. Enterline. So SarahREnterline.com is my website. And that's got all of my speaking topics, a contact form, my email, all the things I'm working on. It's got a free Bible studies you can download. So all the Bible studies I've taught at my church, I think there's Romans, Ephesians, and Job are all up there. They're downloadable for free, editable
Amazing.
versions. So you can edit them for your church if you would like. But all of my apologetic notes or, translation things, that's all in there. So
Oh,
if
amazing.
like, oh, I want to teach a study and I want to incorporate all that, but I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to do it myself. Like they're free. So,
That's
so you can go
amazing.
download those. And yeah, so that's all on the website. So SarahREnterline.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on. We're so grateful to have chit-chatted with you. And I hope this has whetted, if that's a word, whet your appetite for all things apologetics. If you've never kind of ventured into that realm before, we hope that you will do so. And it's just, I mean, really, it never ends. You go, I'm like, you go on one and you're like, ooh, now I'm going to look into this and this and this and this and this. And it's an incredible faith builder, and it's truly amazing. When you start to dive into things about, this is not a blind faith, this is an evidenced faith, and it's remarkable, how much evidence is, available if sometimes you just don't know it's there.
Yeah, I always tell people, like I was saying, apologetics, it won't save a soul. Like you can't argue someone into the kingdom. I mean, maybe you can, but most often, unless the Holy Spirit is calling that person, you can't argue them into the kingdom, right? So apologetics doesn't save souls, but it can save your faith. So if you're struggling or if you need confidence or something like that, as women especially, we get so emotional, we get bogged down with so much stuff. And I feel like if we can just have that one concrete thing to hold on to, or that one thing we can, hope as an anchor, and while we're being tossed to and fro in culture and with life, that if apologetics can do that for you, that's that's what it's for.
Amazing. Well, what a great way to end season 2 of the podcast. Thanks for joining us, Sarah. We will be having a little break, and we will be back a little later in the year for season 3 ahead of our Pastors' Wives Retreat, which happens in October. It's the first Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of October. I want to say it's 7, 8, and 9, somewhere about there. Check your calendar. First Monday through Wednesday of October. We will be in Whittier this year at Morning Star Christian Fellowship. Bigger facility. We ran out of space last year and we had to turn people away, which we never want to do. And so registration will be opening soon for that. So stay tuned and we will see you next time. God bless.